Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the session on research and publication ethics. Today I will be discussing the idea of ethics in research. We'll talk about morality, moral philosophy and moral judgment. My name is Dr. Nirbhay Kumar Mishra. I am an assistant professor at Institute of Applied Sciences and Humanities at GLA University, Mathura. So let's try to recap of what we have done so far. So we have developed our understanding to the research and publication ethics. We recognize the role of philosophy, logic and scientific conduct in the research development. We talked about the fresh researcher's perspective. We learned about the prepositions and basic components of research. We discussed and critically analyzed 5 research philosophies: positivism, critical realism, interpretivism, postmodernism and pragmatism. So after this session you will learn ethics as a second order study, what it means. We will talk about types of ethics, so you will come to know the types of ethics. You will understand about the meta-ethics, normative ethics and applied ethics. You will also understand the nature of morality in terms of the 2 major theories, cognitivism and non-cognitivism. We will discuss here cognitivism because we have to understand from this ethical theory from the scientific perspective. So we'll take up the idea of non-cognitivism. That's by A.J. Ayer, C.L. Stevenson and R.M. Hare. We'll take also moral cognitivist point of view from the Philippa Foot's paper. We will discuss one of her research papers, right? And then we'll talk about moral judgment. So you'll come to know about the moral judgment and the idea of ethical decision making. You will also understand one thought experiment that we will discuss from the text of Philippa Foot's, right? That is on the runway trolley problem. We'll discuss its 2 versions, classic and the bridge versions, and you will also understand what is the doctrine of double effect, and then we'll try to have the brief understanding on the consequentialist and non-consequentialist ethical reasonings. And let's move further. So let's start with this idea, ethics as a second order study. Before we understand what is ethics and in what sense we define it as a second order study, let's try to understand the idea how ethics takes place in society. So first of all, for any moral discourse or any ethics to take place, we need to have society. In society we see the morality. People have morals and they have a different sense of right and wrong, good and bad, and what ought to be done and what ought not to be done. Of course, we see the first level in society is the morality, right? People have the moral sense and morality. Ethics is a second order study. So in ethics what we do, we try to critically analyze. So first of all, in ethics we try to systematize the morality, and in the way we critically analyzed by different reasons. We take certain perspectives, even sometimes we adapt scientific reasons to analyze, and we can have the theories of rights and responsibilities. We can have one's perspective also in ethics. So ethics differs from the morality. Morality can be, kind of opinion, but ethics is not opinion, but it has certain, objectivity, certain reasoning it involves. So it starts with systematizing the morality, and then it has some point of view to defend those moral ideas, right? And then it recommends certain codes of conduct or certain ethical principles. So when we philosophize the morality, actually then we turn from morality to ethical discourse. So ethics involves kind of study with systematic arguments, reasons, point of views that we carry, and it is a kind of process of systematizing, defending, and recommending. That's where it actually differs from morality. Ordinarily, people interchangeably use these two terms, morality and ethics, but in philosophical discourses, we can have a meaningful difference between the morality and ethics. Now, let's talk about the types of ethics. So, when we analyze the ethics, we generally find 4 types of ethics: meta-ethics, normative ethics, descriptive ethics, and applied ethics. So let's talk about the meta-ethics. So in meta-ethics, we are primarily concerned about the origin and meaning of the ethical terms. We also try to investigate into the reasons of origin of this ethics. Then we have divine theory, like ethics is a will of God. God has created these ethical intuitions in the human, and we can have a different perspective also when we talk about the social relativism. We talk about that ethics is created by society, and when we take the psychological point of view to understand the origin of ethics, then we talk about the it's a kind of individual emotional response that we also study while discussing emotivism also. So here we typically try to understand the origin of the ethical theories and ideas, and also we try to analyze the ethical terms like good, right, virtue, what they mean and what they account for. Coming to the normative ethics, so normative ethics is about the standards, right, practices, habits, duties, responsibilities. So it's about good habits, duties, and consequences. Of course, we can trace back the most ancient ethical theory, and it was originally structured by Aristotle, right? Virtue theory is this instance of most ancient normative theory. So in normative theory, it is more about practices. It's more about the it's more about the policies. It's more about the ethical actions and ethical decision makings. Coming to the third type, that is descriptive ethics. So descriptive ethics actually differs from both meta-ethics and normative ethics, because in that descriptive ethics we talk about we describe the moral behavior. We describe the behavior. We try to explain the standards and the values of the particular organization, society, and there we try to have the explanation from the psychological point of views, sociological point of views, anthropological point of view. We try to explain the moral behavior by taking these all perspectives. So it's typically about describing, explaining the morality. So coming to last, applied ethics. So when we come to the applied ethics, it's actually about the applications of the ethical theories and the point of views that we learn from these whole meta-normative and descriptive discourses, and we can apply in different professional discourses, like we have business ethics, bioethics, engineering ethics, environment ethics. So what we do, we try to structure code of conducts. We try to develop practices. We try to explain the codes. We try to understand the practices. So all we do to resolve certain professional problems, social problems, and then we apply the ethics in that. So it's about the applied ethics. So let's move further. So now we will start our understanding ethics from meta-ethical point of view, and we'll try the metaphysical issues which involved in the metaethical discourse. So first we try to understand the two kinds of issues we see in metaethics: metaphysical issues and psychological issues. When we analyze metaethics from the viewpoint of metaphysics, we see again two kinds of perspectives: objectivism and relativism. Of course, objectivism theory is influenced by Plato, and he talks about the otherworldly theory, like ideas exist in other worlds, and this world is actually a different kind of world. So in objectivism, we see as the ethics originated from the other world, it's not created in this world. And then we have the more developments in the theoretical perspective, like voluntarism. It emerged, right, as a voluntary act, and divine command theory, that God has created kind of moral intuitions in everyone's mind and heart to understand the universal ethics. So in objectivism, of course, we see the universalism, universal moral theory, that depends on this idea that ethics is not ethics is not socially created, culturally created, or individually created. It's not the outcome of this world. It belongs to some other words, or God sort of thing. So when we compare this objectivism from its contrast theory, that is relativism, then relativism believes that ethics is created by the humans, and it is created in this world. So that's called the relativism, moral relativism, that morality differs from person to person, from culture to culture, and society to societies, and it's not based on any kind of universal concepts, and these concepts actually change in the course of time. So we see three formulations in this relativism: individual relativism, cultural relativism, and social relativism. Now let's try to analyze the metaethics from the psychological point of views, and we have the psychological issues. We start with the discussion of egoism and altruism, right? So egoism, psychological egoism, like Hobbes, they define that the state of nature, everybody is feared, so they all want to have the secure, safe life, so they all have a social contract for the ease and convenience. So our moral behavior is not naturally moral, because it is a kind of it's kind of psychological behavior actually. So what they say, that egoism is kind of, even you act morally, you do something right, sometimes it is to satisfy your ego. It's a kind of satisfaction of power inside you. And then psychological altruism, like Joseph Butler, altruism, it's about that when you act morally, it's not all moral intentions are the selfish intentions. They are not only egoistic intentions. Sometimes even there can be some moral intentions where you not act from the selfish attitude, but actually you have the idea of benevolence, idea of doing good for the other, and that's where there is altruism in your psychology. And that altruism is kind of independent altruism to your selfish intention or selfish attitude. So coming to the other perspectives based on emotions and reasons, we see David Hume talks about that our mind should be slave of our passions and emotions. Our passion and emotions should rule our behavior, whatsoever moral behavior also, right? So he emphasized on emotions. On the other hand, we see the contrast in the Kantian deontological theory, right? We find that Kant based the moral theory on the rationality, that by reason you can be free, and when you are free then you can be moral. Actually, that the rationality he defines further in terms of the imperative, moral imperative. Two kinds of imperative he talks about: hypothetical imperative and the categorical imperative. And he says that in being categorical in your intention or in your moral behavior, you can be free from your causal determinism, like your desires like inclinations, you can be free, and then actually you can have the rational justification of the freedom. Then that is about your autonomous behavior he talks about. So he emphasized on the reason more, and the David Hume on the other hand emphasized on the emotions. So further, we can have the other psychological issues involving a feminist point of view, and there we find the male and female morality. So what feminist point of view actually did, they actually criticized the historical patriarchal male-centered morality, and they found that's a mechanical sort of thing, right, the way it has been traditionally defined. So they talk about the unique female moral perspective, where they emphasized on the new values which we find in the female characters, like care, like like the sympathy, and these care-based model can be really appropriate for all kind of business management activities, and that's also lies in the business ethics also. Even in the normal activities, care is something which can be the basis of our moral behavior. So further we move to the discussion on normative ethics, and that's the very expanded discussion here we see. So when we talk about normative ethics, we talk about the norms, practices, and also normative theories also, like virtue theory, utilitarianism, and deontology. Here the golden rule is that behave in such a way that you want to yourself, right? So let's talk about in brief about these three different normative perspectives. We will be analyzing in further lecture these three ethical theories in a great detail, but here we take a brief account on these three. So virtue ethics developed by Aristotle emphasized on the character building, it emphasized on the inculcation of virtues, and moral education is the recent criteria that we can educate the virtues in one's character, in one's understanding. And then we have the non-consequentialist point of view, that is deontology, right, that emphasized on the rationality, freedom, and the categorical imperative and universal morality that they talk about. And we have the consequentialist perspective, in which the prominent theory is utilitarianism, that emphasized on the principle of utility, that is maximizing goodness for maximum number of people. They emphasize on the goodness, happiness, and pleasure, maximizing goodness, happiness, and pleasure, and minimizing badness, sadness, and pain, and they derive from psychological hedonism. We will discuss further. So let's try to analyze virtue ethics in terms of good habits of character. And it was when we go back to history, when we read the Plato, we find that he talks about cardinal virtues like wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. He talks about that 4 classes also in society, labor class, right, they need to have temperance, right, and the soldier class need to have courage, and the justice king class, or all the administrators must have the wisdom and justice. So let's to see the development from Plato to Aristotle. Then Aristotle talk about the golden mean theory, that extreme of any virtue cannot be good. If someone is timid, someone cannot fight against the wrong, or if someone is showing foolish hardiness, then someone is going to harm oneself. So according to Aristotle, virtue actually works when it is kind of golden mean. In between the two extremes, we can have a reasonable practice of virtues, right? And they talk about the emulation and the moral desert. According to moral desert, that people deserve according to what they do. If they act virtuously, they should be rewarded, and if they act bad, they should be punished, right? Again, we see a good concept in the virtue theory, that's teleology and telepathy. We will discuss further in the next lecture, right? So here we see in the medieval ages, right, we talk I discussed that when philosophy was in faith, medieval age was in the clutch of religion, and churches and pope were defining everything. So then we see the development of the theological virtues like faith, hope, and charity, McIntyre discussed about the central role, in moral theory about the virtues, and they talk about the virtues are created through social traditions. Now let's talk about the principle of obligation, right? So before the Kant, we see Samuel Penrose. He talks about duties to God, duties to oneself, and duties to others. And then we see again the right-based, natural rights theory, where we see the universal, equal, and inalienable theories, and we see this the impression of this Lockean view on the human rights also. We can see the impact of both Locke and Immanuel Kant on the human rights theory, and Immanuel Kant is known as father of human rights also. So John Locke talks about the natural rights theory, right, in the non-consequential discussion, like private property, life, liberty, and happiness. So of course we talked about the Immanuel Kant. He talks about the universal morality. He talks about the duty is humanity principle that always treat humans as an end and never as means. He talks about moral agency in terms of rationality. Moral agency is the capacity to act really, to perform moral actions, and by comprehending moral reasons. And there he gives importance to one's motive and intentionality and freedom. And W.D. Ross further talks about the prima facie duties and actual duties, and he actually tries to resolve the dilemma that we see in the Kantian discourse, that when we are faced with a dilemma between the two duties, how to then respond. Then actually he talks about that you respond according to the practical solutions, right, which has to be given priority, and talks about the fidelity and non-maleficence are the two factors in the morality. So let's talk about the consequentialist approaches, right? When we talk about the ethical egoism, right? So we talk about the social contract theory, like Hobbes. They talked about the morality is construction of society for one's safety, protection, and the convenience, right? Again, egoistic point of view says that the best moral acts are having the selfish attitude, right? Selfish motive. And ethical altruism maintains the fact that apart from the selfish motive, we have also the altruistic motive. So when we talk about the utilitarianism, we see two great scholars, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. So let's talk in brief about these two scholars, how they developed the utilitarianism. So Jeremy Bentham wrote this book, Utilitarianism, in which he organized this utilitarian theory. He talks about psychological hedonism, that by their very human nature we desire pleasure and avoid pain. So that is a fact of the human nature. From this psychological hedonism, Jeremy Bentham derived the ethical hedonism, that we should always act in such a way that increases our pleasure and minimizes our pain. So again, we see some kind of criticism in Judgement's theory, because while Jeremy Bentham focused on act-based theory, while Judgement talks about the rule-based theory, and he gives importance to human reason, right? And the very human being, he emphasized that human being has different qualities like thinking, analyzing, perception, making difference, and choice. Choice actually represents our rationality, and that's where Judgement says that we human can reasonably differentiate between higher order pleasure than from the lower order pleasure, and that's difference we don't find in Jeremy Bentham's discussion. He does not make any quality distinction amongst the pleasure, while Judgement does. So we see that when we have the kind of which utility has to be given priority, then we see in the discussion of G. Moore, he talks about the ideal utilitarianism, right? And when we take up the all utilitarians, right, and it's very difficult to measure the utility, right? And then we see the two different point of views developed by the G. Moore and R.M. here, in which they talk about the ideal utilitarianism and preference utilitarianism. Now let's try to understand the applied ethics discourses. So as I told you that in applied ethics, what we do, we take into account both meta-ethics and normative ethics. So from the meta-ethics, we take the major ideas like agency, intentionality, moral personality, social moral responsibilities. These are ideas that we take from the meta-ethical discourses, while from the normative ethics we we take the ethical decision making, moral judgment, right, and virtue, deontology, and utilitarianism perspective to understand the different professional practices, to understand the different social professional problems, and then accordingly we try to resolve them. So we see the development of different professional fields like business ethics, environmental ethics, bioethics, engineering ethics, and right-based ethics. So in business ethics precisely we are concerned about the business practices and whether they are ethically performed or not. And there are some major ideas that we see, like corporate ethics. We try to analyze, understand corporate moral personhood, and the idea of corporate social responsibility, and the idea of stakeholders. So these are the main ideas that we try to analyze in business ethics, right? So again, in discussing about the environmental ethics, we have the main ideas like the deep ecology, eco-spiritualism, and sustainability. In bioethics, we find some relevant ideas which requires our ethical attention. They are abortion, euthanasia, and surrogacy. And then engineering ethics, we find again the application of ethical issues in artificial intelligence, where we talk about the issues based on privacy, intellectual property rights. And then in right-based ethics theory, we find some important issues like gender rights issues, same-sex issues, transgender issues, animal rights issues, and environmental rights issues. Coming to the application of this virtue, deontology, and utilitarianism, we see the application in business, social, technological, and environmental domains, where these three prominent normative theories, they help to structure policies, standards, and code of conduct. Now let's go ahead with the discussion to understand the nature of morality. So when we define the nature of morality, we see two different perspectives, cognitive and non-cognitive. So let's try to understand what cognitivist scholars they talk about. According to them, moral judgment are prepositions which are truth apt. They are statements that can be considered true or false, like we see in the positivism also. So cognitivists believe that moral statements are meaningful statements, and they can be the true or false, and they are not simply our reactions, emotions, sentiments, but they have some kind of objectivity in the ways that we have the scientific facts also. On the other hand, non-cognitivists, they believe that ethical statements, I mean, they are not in the category of statements. Ethics sentences do not express proposition. They are not like propositions, as we discussed in the earlier discussion. Proposition is a kind of statement which can be either true or false. So therefore they cannot be true or false, right? So when we see the two the further developments in terms of ethical naturalist and ethical non-naturalist, so ethical naturalists, they define the morality in terms of that in terms of moral properties, and they are like natural properties, like we have with the other natural things, so and can be examined as such. So according to them, that ethical naturalists believe that moral sentiments or moral ideas, they are like the other natural things. They have some properties and which we can examine and observe. They relate to something we can examine through sense experience science. Here the naturalists believe that ethical ideas can be scientific, they can be objective, and they can be they can be based on our sense and experiences. On the other hand, ethical non-naturalists, they contradict the view, and they maintain that moral properties are a distinct kind of property, and they are definitely part of the world. Of course, they accept that they are part of world. They believe in moral realism of a sort, but they cannot easily examine them through experience. So we can't have sense experience like we have with the other natural properties, right? Let's further move to understand the moral realism and moral anti-realism. So when moral realism maintains this point that in some sense moral terms refer to something real in the world. For example, pleasure, happiness, utility, the moral law, God's command. Moral law can be discovered. So they explain that these things are meaningful and real, and we can discover certain laws, right, to explain and understand these things. while moral intellectualism argues that they do not refer to anything real or in the world, but or something else entirely. For example, your personal attitude towards something, moral law cannot be discovered in the world. So they cast doubt on the moral law. They anti-realist. They believe that the moral terms or the moral behavior is a kind of one's emotions, reactions, and response only. Let's talk about the some scholars. So let's try to understand the emotivism the way A.J. Ayer has defined. So he is precisely a non-cognitivist, and he says that moral ideas or moral expressions, they ethical terms do not serve only to express feelings. They are calculated also to arouse feelings and so to stimulate actions. So according to him, it's our emotional response, and that what we try to arouse in others also. So according to the AJ, we can have two kinds of meaningful statements, right? Analytic and synthetic, that we have discussed already. So ethical statements are not verifiable. They can only be understood as expression of feelings. It's like we support something, like hooray, and or we don't support something, boo, like sort of thing, right? Further, C.L. Stevenson develops this emotivism, and in his book Ethics in Language, he discussed the emotive meanings of words. When making a moral judgment, we are offering our opinion on it, but also trying to influence others' attitude. So it's not simply that we express our emotions. We try to influence other attitude by the moral statements or moral. So ethical statements are therefore based on emotions, but also our experience of the word and how we want it to be. So he takes the point of the worldview that one involves when he ethically reacts in a situation. So it's not only one's emotional response, but the point of view, the worldview he carries in one's ethical response. So ethical disagreements are disagreements about fundamental principles. So let's talk about prescriptivism developed by R.M. Hare. He's also the non-cognitivist. So he talks about that it's not that ethical statement is not only about the emotions and they carry a kind of world view, but actually what we do in our ethical responses, we try to prescribe what we like, so what we feel good. So ethical statements do not state facts and are not true or false. So again, he says that the ethical statements are not objective facts, but an expression of our will or wishes, what we want or what we wish. If we use the word good in a moral sense, we are using a set of standards that apply to a person or action, and we commend that person or actions. If we say someone ought to do something, we are saying that we ought to do it as well. So it's kind of prescription, not only for oneself but for the others also. So let's turn back to say different kind of moral point of view, that is moral cognitivism, and we will precisely discuss about Philippa Foot's moral cognitivism. Okay, so she is a British philosopher, right, and she worked in analytic philosophy and on the Aristotelianism. She develops the theories in metaethics, moral psychology, and applied ethics. Okay, and her notable ideas, that we will discuss in this lecture also, that's trolley problem, and she works on the modern revival of virtue theory, and she also wrote a wonderful paper titled "The Problem of Abortion and the Doctrine of Double Effect." We will be discussing some examples from this paper, like trolley problem and the problem of abortion also, right? So let's try to understand about the moral judgment, right? So we'll try to understand what is moral judgment and why we do moral judgment. So of course our ordinary moral life goes on till we don't have any moral dilemma, right, or we don't face any moral problem. When we face a problem, like when we talk about the moral judgments, okay, so let's talk about the moral judgments. So of course when you talk about the moral judgments, MJ, for example, so we have to understand three things, right? Well, first we analyze our choices, right? And we analyze our actions, and we analyze our decisions. Okay, so what we do in general, we analyze in choices whether our choices are, good or bad, right or wrong. In actions, we see whether they are good actions or the bad actions, and decisions ought and ought not. So we have to understand here, moral judgment actually takes place when we're faced with a situation where we have both kinds of consequences, positive and negative. We understand easily that if we have all the positive results, there is no moral dilemma, and we certainly act in that situation. Or when we have the negative consequences, all negative consequences, we don't act in the situation. Only we have the moral dilemma when we have kind of problem, right, in our moral ideas, duties, responsibilities, or in terms of results, in terms of duties, or in terms of virtues, we can have the problems, and then a dilemma occurs, and then we requires moral judgment, and that's what we can say EDM, right? EDM is ethical decision making. So there we have to decide what is the right thing to do. Okay, so when we talk about the ethical decision making, even the researchers, when we adapt certain perspectives, so in researchers we precisely working on the problem solving. Okay, so decision making starts with this rationality. First, we try to understand the moral reasons involving in the situations. Which are the moral reasons, right? And then we have to resolve it. Like, let's take for the example, okay, we can take example of being friend. Suppose you are a friend, and you are in examination hall, right? And your friend needs your help. Of course, this is kind of moral dilemma, because you are a friend of your friend, and your friend needs your help. So you are in dilemma whether to help or not, because that's a morally wrong action to support your friend in examination hall, and that is unfair means to support the friend. So you rationalize it very well, that what to do, and then you critically think. So what you can do, being a friend, first of all, you make good friends, and you try to help your friends before the examination hall, so to avoid the ethical dilemma. And even if you face the dilemma, then you act rationally on the moral grounds, moral reasons, and duties to yourself, even virtue and utility. So you can have first the virtue that helping through wrong means is not the purpose of any moral action, and that's where you can apply the teleology, and you can say that that's telepathic behavior. And then according to duties, being a good student, you should not help your friend and make a case of unfair means. And again, by the utility, again, it can be maximum bad. If everybody tries to help the other student, nobody will study hard, and then the education and the studentship and the other the virtues in the education, they will diminish. So again, based on the utilitarianism, again you can say that this is not a good practice to help in the examination hall, or helping in cheating, that is morally wrong. So you apply this critical thinking in that kind of decision making. Even when you do conduct your research, then again you make decision making, how to choose a subject, and then if your subject is minor, then how to have the ethical approvals. Then you have to decide the procedures and the ways. You have to apply the reasons, how to conduct your research studies, precisely if it is on the minors. So again, you have to involve with the decision coming through the reasons, and then critical thinking, and then this critical thinking resolved your problems, and that's where you reach to the problem solving. So in that ethical decision making model, we see the role of 4, decision making, rationality, critical thinking, and problem solving. So we are going to understand about more about the moral judgment through a runway trolley problem, and now we are going to talk about the classic version. This thought experiment was originally designed by Philippa Foot, and she discussed this thought experiment in her paper, the case of a boson and the doctrine of double effect. So let's try to understand this runway trolley problem first of all. So let me draw off this trolley problem for you. So here is a track, okay, and there is runway trolley, and you are the driver in the runway trolley, okay, and runway trolley of course carrying with the passengers, right. So you are a driver of this runway trolley, and runway trolley is hurtling on the track at 60 miles per hour, right, and what you see at the end of the track that there are 5 workers working on the track, okay, they all having tools in their hands, they are working on the track. So what happens, I mean, you feel really worried, you press horn doesn't work, and these 5 workers, you can say they are enchained, they cannot move also. So this is a kind of thought experiment, right. That's not a real case study, this is a hypothetical case study designed by Philippa Foot to understand the ethical decision making in this case, okay. So you see that the 5 workers are working at the end of the track, and you try to press the horn doesn't work, and then you really become worried because you are about to crash into those 5 workers, and for sure they all will die. So you immediately apply the brakes, but even brakes don't work. Now it's really very tough situation, moral situation for you, until you observe that there is another track on to the right. There is another track, and where you can safely you can safely turn this trolley to on this track, okay. You can make this safe turn, it is given in this case study, but you see that there is one worker working, having tool in his hand. Now you have to make a moral judgment, you have to make a decision whether to go straight and killing 5, or whether to make this turn, killing 1 and saving 5. So what is the right thing to do? When we ask this question, so majority responds that it is right thing to make this safe turn and save 1 person. And the basis of this moral judgment, of course, if we analyze from these 2 theories, right, utilitarianism, right, and the deontology, we see that it's the utilitarian decision, because we see that it is better to save 5 than it is better to save 5 at the cost of 1. So what we do, we here do maximum good for maximum number, and that's I defined you principle of utility earlier. So in this first classic version, we see that majority has made decision based on this principle of utility, and they turn utilitarian in their moral judgment. Okay, so let's analyze this first version first of all, right. So we see that there are 2 kinds of intentionality. We'll further analyze in terms of doctrine of double effect also in this lecture. We can have the possibility of 2 kinds of intentions, oblique intention and as if intentionality. So as if intentionality is not your original intentionality, right, and then in that we see in this case the agency is not based on freedom, that's kind of causal agency. If we go back, we see that in this case study either of the course of actions are determined. You can't have freedom actually, right, either you go straight or you change the track. In either cases you have to kill people, so you better decide to save 5 than killing the 5, right? Then here we see that it is based on heteronomous moral system, because it's not based on your autonomous free choice, because the situation is such because determined that you have to make a decision. You don't have to follow your freedom, or you can craft your free intentions. So here we see killing versus killing. So we choose 1 killing and we choose 5 saving here, right? And then we adapt here. We can't have the first person point of view also in this case study, because it's not depending on my own intention or my own reason, rather depending on the results which are external and which are third personal, right? And then we see the utilitarianism involved in this moral judgment, and utilitarianism is a worldview which is agent neutral. So it does not respect the one person which is on this track. It does not respect individual or the person who is on the other track. It respects simply the greater good for the greater number. So let's talk about the second breach version in this case study. So in the breach version, let's try to again try to understand the breach version. Now in this breach version, there is a single track, okay, and there is over bridge on this track, and trolley is now automatically driven, carrying the passengers, right? And there is no driver in this trolley, because trolley is automatically driven, carrying the passengers. And again, there we see the 5 workers working, having tools in their hands, right? So they are working on the track again, right? And in this version, bridge version, there is no side track. So we don't have side track, we have single track, and you are not the driver of this trolley this time. Rather, you are onlooker on the bridge, okay? You are here on the bridge, you are onlooker, simply looking at the trolley passing by over here. So it comes in your mind that somehow trolley is not pressing on, it's not slowing down. Then you understand that's going to kill these 5 workers, right? And they all will die for sure. So in the first case, I mean, you try to jump off yourself, think to jump off yourself, so to make successful obstruction, but you are too thin to make successful obstruction. You see this irrational choice. Actually, even if you jump, that not 5 but 6 person will die. Even you can die, right? So what occurs in the next moment? You see a very giant fat man, right? A very giant fat man you see in front of you, and he's leaning onto the bridge like this. So if you give him a gentle push, so this fat man will be down on the track here, and he will make that successful obstruction to stop this trolley and save this 5 workers' life. Now, when we ask the ethical decision making in this case to the people, then they have a different reaction. Now their moral judgment is changed. Now they are not behaving like utilitarian. Majority responded that they would not push this fat man and they will not save this 5 workers' life. So that's really drastic change in terms of our moral judgments, in terms of patterns of mind and the moral reasoning. So if we compare these 2 versions, so result wise, if we changing the track, saving the 5, even if we push here the fat man, again we will save 5 workers. So if you take the utilitarian point of view, result oriented judgment, then the result is same. But in the second version, majority's response is different. They don't want to push the fat man, and somehow they are behaving like deontologist. They're minding the intention, they're minding the wrong intention, wrong means, and they're minding the duty to humanity sort of thing. I mean, then we have to analyze further what kind of change is happening here. But apart from deontology and utilitarianism, let's try to understand this case study from one another point of view, which is which has been discussed by Philippa Foot in her paper, and that is based on doctrine of double effect. So let's try to understand this case study again on the basis of this doctrine of double effect, right? So in this doctrine of double effect, first we have to understand when there are two positive and negative consequences are involved, then this principle actually gives kind of guideline to act and what can be the right thing to do. It actually explains, right? So first it talks about the nature of action, that is the nature of the act condition. So according to this principle, your intention, I mean your nature of action should be morally good or indifferent. It should not be morally bad, morally wrong. You can't intend bad or you can't intend wrong. So the second point is the means end condition. So in this, according to this principle, that bad must not be the mean to achieve the good. And the third point is the intention condition. Only good intention you involve with, right? And the unintended foreseen bad, maybe the unintended results, right? And then proportionality condition, according to this, at least bad should not be more than the good. Good effect and bad effect, they can be equal, but bad should not be more than the good. So let's try to understand, quickly analyze these two versions, right? Based on this doctrine of double effect, we see the first condition, the intention is not bad because you want to save the 5 workers, and when you turn the trolley, that is unintended foreseen result, you can say, and the means is not bad because you are turning the trolley, you are not directly killing someone by hands, right? Even if this person survives in the end, you will be the most happiest man, right? Because you are a driver, you are not a murderer. And let's the third condition, the proportionality condition, that is according to this condition, you see the good result is more than the bad result. Okay, so again when we compare the second version here, we see that the intention condition fulfilled, that you cannot push the fat man because it is wrong intention, and if you pushing fat man is a bad means to choose. And the proportionate result condition, of course it is debatable, where you see that 5 workers will die, but when we compare this point based on the guilt factor, okay, guilt factor in killing someone directly and letting someone die, we can have 2 different perspectives. When you kill someone directly, you may have more guilt. We can't have any certain point here, but we feel that when we act directly to kill someone, it creates more guilt than letting 5 workers die. So based on this, we can have this analysis that we in the second case we find the direct intention involved. Real intentionality comes to the picture, right? Because we can make the decision, we can choose our intention, we have the moral agency, we have the autonomy. At least we can choose not to push the fat man. That's where we have the moral freedom, and majority has responded like this. So not killing versus allowing or letting die actually present interesting situation where we see the first personal moral point of view can be involved in the second version. Not killing is perfect duty, not letting die imperfect duty. We can have a different interpretation on that, but apart from this, we see that the deontology perspective involved in second case study, and that's why we see agent-centric worldview, because agent has the first person reaction. There's a humanity principle also that don't use human as means, always an end, and you can have the universalizability on this principle where you don't push the fat man, actually you don't use humanity as means also. So let's try to understand the whole analysis. So we see that first version and second version, the first version is consequentialist, and on the second version deontological, and the moral agency we see the passive and neutral in the first version and active in the second version, and results we see the third person, and intention we see in the second version, like intention. We see the role of results in the first version, and we see the role of intention in the first version. So of course we see the hypothetical imperative taking place in the first version and categorical in the second version. So in the first version we see the good for other, and we see the good in itself in terms of the end means. So we analyze in terms of the theory, in terms of the moral agency, in terms of the imperatives, in terms of the end means involved in the ethical judgment or moral judgment. So let me summarize this whole lecture, right? So what we discussed in the whole lecture, we tried to develop understanding on ethics. We analyzed moral philosophy, in what ways we say ethics as a moral philosophy. We discussed about these three different ethical theories and perspectives in ethics: meta-ethical, normative, and applied. And in the end, we developed our philosophical discussion on these two theories, moral cognitivism and moral non-cognitivism, and we tried to understand the ethical decision making, or what you call moral judgment, through the case study of runaway trolley problem. And we also discuss and analyze this problem on the basis of doctrine of double effect. So these are references you can use for the study. Thank you.